High Admiral Crystalex of the Valkyrie Dominion stood motionless on the observation deck of the stellar Archon, their crystalline form refracting the light of an unremarkable yellow star. The planet before them, designated Sol 3, seemed equally unremarkable, yet another world occupied by a pre-FTL species. The neural network connecting all Valkyrie hummed with collective disdain as they processed the preliminary scans. These humans, Crystalex transmitted through the hive mind, their thoughts resonating through the crystalline matrices of their crew, have barely managed to reach their own satellite. Their technology is primitive, their society fragmented, and their bodies. A wave of collective amusement rippled through the fleet. Soft, vulnerable, inefficient. The Valkyrie had encountered countless species in their 10,000 years of expansion. Each one had fallen before their superior technology and collective intelligence. Their crystalline bodies, evolved over millions of years, were practically indestructible. Their neural network allowed instant communication and perfect coordination across vast distances. They were the apex species of the galaxy, and this would be just another routine acquisition of resources. First contact occurred on a Tuesday morning in downtown Singapore. The Valkyrie chose it for its population density and technological development, a perfect location to demonstrate their overwhelming superiority. Their crystalline ships descended from the clouds, each one a masterpiece of geometric precision that made human architecture look like a child's building blocks. Dr. Sarah Chen, quantum physicist and lead researcher at the Singapore Institute of Technology, watched from her laboratory window as the aliens emerged. Their bodies were like living diamond, internal lights pulsing in complex patterns. She immediately recognized something her alien visitors didn't. The mathematical precision of those patterns suggested a networked consciousness. The Valkyrie's message was simple: Earth's resources were now property of the Dominion. Resistance would be met with immediate termination. They expected surrender within hours, as had happened on countless worlds before. Instead, they got Professor Chen's coffee maker. The device, modified within minutes of first contact, unleashed a targeted electromagnetic pulse that disrupted the local Valkyrie neural network. The aliens hadn't bothered to shield against such primitive technology. Why would they? But those precise, beautiful patterns that Dr. Chen had noticed became their weakness. 3 Valkyrie soldiers fell, their consciousness temporarily severed from the hive mind. Across the globe, humanity's response proved equally unpredictable. In Moscow, taxi drivers used their knowledge of back alleys to run circles around the geometrically minded aliens. In Lagos, street vendors disappeared into crowded markets, then emerged with improvised weapons that exploited the crystalline being's resonant frequencies. In Rio de Janeiro, a teenage hacker figured out how to broadcast interference patterns that gave the Valkyrie the equivalent of a migraine. The Valkyrie were stunned. Their neural network buzzed with confusion and, for the first time in centuries, a hint of concern. These humans weren't following any of the established patterns of species behavior. There was no centralized resistance to crush, no military hierarchy to decapitate. Instead, millions of individuals were making millions of independent decisions, creating chaos that their collective consciousness struggled to process. High Admiral Crystalex reformed their battle strategies 12 times in the first day alone. Each time, humans adapted faster than the Valkyrie could implement their plans. The Admiral watched in disbelief as their first wave of forces was pushed back not by superior technology or military might, but by sheer unstoppable creativity. Impossible, Crystalex transmitted to the fleet. Their primitive tools shouldn't be able to affect our systems. Their tactics defy all strategic algorithms. Their resistance patterns match no known species response. In their 10,000 years of conquest, the Valkyrie had encountered many species with superior technology, superior numbers, or superior physical capabilities. But they had never encountered a species that could innovate this quickly, that could turn their own sophistication against them, that could operate so effectively without centralized control. As the first day of invasion drew to a close, Dr. Chen stood in her transformed laboratory, surrounded by hastily assembled devices that could disrupt Valkyrie communications. She smiled as she received reports from around the world. Humans weren't just resisting. They were learning, adapting, and discovering new ways to fight back with every passing hour. "You know your problem," she said to a disabled Valkyrie soldier they were studying. "You're too perfect, too predictable. You've forgotten that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't perfection, it's chaos. And we humans? We're chaos incarnate." High Admiral Crystalex, watching their invasion plans unravel from orbit, was beginning to understand that they had made a grave miscalculation. They had dismissed humans as primitive based on their technology, but they were starting to realize that technology wasn't everything. And this understanding came with a terrifying question. What would happen when these unpredictable, adaptable beings got their hands on advanced technology? The neural network hummed with the first emotion the Valkyrie had felt in millennia: fear. In the 3 weeks since first contact, humanity had learned more about advanced technology than they had in the previous century, not through careful study or peaceful exchange, but through desperate innovation and reverse engineering of every fallen Valkyrie crystal they could get their hands on. Colonel Maya Rodriguez stood in the makeshift command center beneath the ruins of Mexico City, surrounded by a bizarre collection of repurposed technology. What had once been a subway maintenance tunnel now housed humanity's largest anti-Valkyrie research facility. The walls were lined with stolen crystalline fragments, each one providing valuable data about their enemies. "Show me the latest pattern analysis," she ordered, and Dr. James Chen, Sarah Chen's brother, pulled up a holographic display cobbled together from salvaged alien tech and a modified Xbox controller. "The Valkyrie operate on predictable frequencies," James explained, manipulating the display with practiced ease. "They're like a living quantum computer network, but they've never had to defend against someone attacking the network itself. They've always been so far ahead of other species that they never developed proper cybersecurity." Maya watched the patterns shift. Because they never needed it. Perfect isn't always better. A junior technician burst into the room. "Colonel, the Valkyrie are making another push toward the surface." Maya smiled. "Right on schedule. They really can't help themselves, can they? Always following the most logical, efficient path." She activated the facility's comm system. "All units, Operation Chaos is go. You know what to do." Above ground, the Valkyrie advance was a sight of terrible beauty. Hundreds of crystalline warriors moved in perfect synchronization, their forms refracting sunlight into dazzling patterns. They had adapted their tactics based on previous encounters, their collective intelligence processing every previous defeat to create the perfect assault strategy. What they hadn't counted on was that humans had been letting them win small victories, feeding them false patterns to analyze. The first wave of Valkyrie warriors crossed what their scans showed as stable ground, only to discover that humans had spent weeks hollowing out the streets and filling the cavities with a makeshift resonance gel developed by a team of college students who specialized in musical acoustics. The gel amplified the crystalline being's own harmonics, creating feedback loops in their neural network. Confusion rippled through the Valkyrie ranks. Their perfect formation began to break down as conflicting data flooded their shared consciousness. This was the moment the human resistance had been waiting for. From hidden positions, teams armed with modified sound systems unleashed precisely tuned frequencies. Other groups deployed electromagnetic pulse generators built from scavenged microwave ovens and car batteries. None of these weapons would have posed any threat to the Valkyrie individually. But humanity had learned to strike at the one thing the aliens couldn't adapt fast enough to protect: their networked consciousness. In orbit, the Valkyrie fleet registered the attack with growing concern. Their ground forces were being defeated not by superior firepower, but by humans turning the very foundations of Valkyrie society against them. The hive mind buzzed with attempts to analyze and counter these tactics, but each solution they deployed was met with 3 new forms of human ingenuity. Back in the command center, Maya watched the battle unfold through their cobbled-together sensor network. "We're not just fighting their soldiers," she explained to a group of new recruits. "We're fighting their assumptions. They think their neural network makes them invincible, but you know what happens when you network everything together." A young soldier raised her hand. "One vulnerability becomes everyone's vulnerability." Exactly. The Valkyrie evolved to be perfect, to think as one. But evolution has a funny way of creating blind spots. They literally cannot conceive of some of the solutions we're creating because their shared consciousness dismisses them as illogical or inefficient. Dr. Chen's display suddenly lit up with new patterns. They're adapting again. The hive mind is trying to reconfigure their entire neural frequency. Maya grinned. "Good. That means phase 2 is working." They're so focused on countering our attacks that they haven't realized we're not just fighting them. We're learning from them. Across the globe, other resistance cells were engaged in similar battles. In Tokyo, a group of gamers had figured out how to use old video game console processors to predict and disrupt Valkyrie movement patterns. In Nairobi, local engineers had developed a way to use the city's metal-rich soil to create electromagnetic disruption fields. In Rio, that same teenage hacker who had caused problems during the initial invasion had assembled a team that was actively mimicking and corrupting Valkyrie communication signals. The Valkyrie had expected to face primitive weapons and simple tactics. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that treated their advanced technology not as something to be feared, but as a puzzle to be solved. Every defeated Valkyrie warrior, every downed ship, every disrupted signal provided humans with more pieces of that puzzle. As the battle for Mexico City reached its climax, Maya received a priority transmission from Dr. Sarah Chen in Singapore. "Colonel, we've done it. We finally mapped their entire neural frequency spectrum. And we found something they never wanted anyone to discover." Maya leaned forward, her eyes reflecting the holographic display. "Tell me." Their collective consciousness isn't just their strength. It's also a cage. They physically cannot think or act independently anymore. And that means we don't have to defeat their entire species. Maya finished. We just have to remind them how to be individuals. The implications of this discovery rippled through the human resistance. For the first time since the invasion began, they had more than just clever tactics and improvised weapons. They had found a fundamental weakness in their enemy's seemingly perfect nature. In orbit, the Valkyrie fleet received the battle data with growing unease. Their neural network was processing more unique attack patterns than it had encountered in the previous 1,000 years combined. And buried beneath their collective consciousness, something long forgotten began to stir: individual thought. The war for Earth was about to enter a new phase, and the Valkyrie were about to learn that perfection had a price they hadn't counted on paying. The quantum physics lab beneath the Australian outback hummed with activity as Dr. Sarah Chen connected the final crystal to their experimental array. Around her, a team of scientists from 12 different countries worked in concentrated silence, each focused on their piece of an impossible puzzle. "Neural pathway mapping at 97%, announced Dr. Yuki Tanaka, her eyes fixed on streams of data flowing across holographic displays. "The Valkyrie consciousness architecture is unlike anything we've ever seen. It's beautiful, really, if you ignore the whole trying to conquer Earth part." Sarah nodded, making minute adjustments to the crystalline network they'd assembled from captured Valkyrie technology. "Beauty can be deadly. Their neural network is so perfect, so efficient, that it became a trap. Imagine spending thousands of years never having an original thought because the collective consciousness already knows everything." The lab door burst open as Colonel Rodriguez strode in, her uniform dusty from the surface. "Please tell me you have good news. We just lost Sydney." Sarah straightened, her expression grim but determined. "We figured it out. The Valkyrie didn't start as a hive mind. They evolved into one. Their crystals are quantum processors, but they're also prison cells. Each Valkyrie is capable of individual thought. They'd just forgotten how. Maya studied the complex array of crystals and human technology. Can we remind them? Better. Sarah gestured to a small device in the center of the array. We can wake them up. Dr. Patel, show her. Dr. Rajesh Patel, a quantum computing specialist from Mumbai, pulled up a simulation. The Valkyrie consciousness operates on quantum entanglement principles. Their perfect coordination comes from every crystal being quantum-locked with every other crystal. But quantum states are fragile things. Especially, Sarah added, when you introduce targeted chaos into the system. Humans have been fighting the Valkyrie as a collective, but now we can fight them one consciousness at a time. Above ground, the battle for Australia raged. The Valkyrie had adapted to most human tactics, their collective intelligence processing, and countering each innovation almost instantly. But they hadn't adapted to losing. Each defeat, however minor, introduced new variables into their perfect system. Variables that created microscopic fractures in their unified consciousness. In Beijing, a team of physicists had noticed these fractures. In Cairo, mathematicians had mapped them. In Sao Paulo, computer scientists had modeled them. And now, in this underground lab in the Australian outback, humanity was about to exploit them. All stations, report status. Maya commanded. Quantum resonator stable. Neural mapping complete. Disruption frequencies calibrated. Surface teams in position. Sarah took a deep breath. Colonel, what we're about to do, it's not just attacking their network. We're about to force an entire species to remember what it means to be individuals. Some of them might not survive the shock. Maya's expression hardened. They gave us no choice. Proceed. Sarah initiated the sequence. The crystal array hummed to life, each fragment pulsing with internal light. The device at its center, dubbed the Chaos Engine by its creators, began spinning, generating quantum interference patterns that rippled through the Valkyrie neural network. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the globe, Valkyrie warriors stumbled as their perfect coordination faltered. Ships in orbit began moving erratically as their crews experienced individual thoughts for the first time in millennia. The collective consciousness that had guided their species for so long began to fragment, not into chaos, but into millions of individual awarenesses. In the Valkyrie flagship above Earth, High Admiral Crystalex experienced something they hadn't felt since their species began its evolution toward collective consciousness. Doubt. Not the calculated risk assessment of the hive mind, but genuine, personal uncertainty. The neural network buzzed with confusion and fear as more and more Valkyrie began to wake up to their own individuality. Some fought against it, trying to maintain their connection to the collective. Others, experiencing free will for the first time, found themselves questioning everything they had ever done. Back in the lab, Sarah and her team worked frantically to maintain the disruption field. It's working, Dr. Tanaka announced. We're seeing neural pattern differentiation across all monitored Valkyrie units. They're becoming individuals. But the Valkyrie collective wasn't going down without a fight. The hive mind, operating on deep survival protocols, began attempting to reestablish control over its fractured components. The battle was no longer just in the physical world. It was taking place in the quantum realm, consciousness against consciousness. They're adapting. Rajesh warned. The collective is trying to force a quantum realignment. Sarah's fingers flew over her controls. No, we didn't wake them up just to let them be imprisoned again. She looked at Maya. Colonel, we need more chaos, the kind only humans can create. Maya understood immediately. She activated her global command channel. All units, Operation Wildfire is go. Show these crystals what human creativity really looks like. Across the planet, human resistance fighters launched a coordinated but deliberately chaotic attack. Each unit used different tactics, different frequencies, different approaches. The Valkyrie collective, already struggling with the quantum disruption, found itself overwhelmed by the sheer unpredictability of the human assault. In orbit, High Admiral Crystalex made a decision, not as part of the collective, but as an individual. For the first time in their existence, they questioned the fundamental nature of their species' path. The tide hadn't just turned in the war for Earth, it had turned in a battle for consciousness itself, and humanity, with its embrace of chaos and individuality, had proven to be not just worthy opponents, but liberators of a kind that the Valkyrie had never imagined possible. The question was no longer whether the Valkyrie could conquer Earth. The question was, who would the Valkyrie become once they remembered how to think for themselves? High above Earth, the Valkyrie fleet hung in disarray. Ship formations, once perfect geometric patterns, now scattered like broken glass as individual commanders wrestled with newfound autonomy. On the bridge of the flagship Stellar Archon, High Admiral Crystalex experienced something entirely new. A memory of their own, not shared through the collective, but personal and private. They remembered being young, before full integration into the hive mind, watching light play through their crystalline form and feeling. Joy, individual, unfiltered joy, launched the final assault. The remnants of the collective consciousness commanded. For the first time in 10,000 years, a Valkyrie said, "No." On Earth, Operation Resonance entered its final phase. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the new Global Defense Command Center, carved into the bedrock beneath the Himalayas. Holographic displays showed Valkyrie ships and ground forces in various states of chaos as the quantum disruption spread through their ranks. "We're seeing unprecedented levels of neural pattern differentiation," Dr. Tanaka reported, her fingers dancing across quantum interfaces. "Some Valkyrie are actively fighting to maintain their individuality now. They're helping us." Colonel Rodriguez studied the tactical displays. "How many?" "Almost 30% of their forces are showing signs of individual consciousness resistance against the collective," Sarah answered. "But the hive mind is fighting back. Hard. We need to end this now, before it can reassert control." Maya nodded grimly. "Initialize Operation Resonance. Phase final." Across the globe, human resistance cells activated devices that had been months in preparation. Each one was different. Humanity had learned that variation was their greatest weapon against the Valkyrie collective. In Kenya, they used geothermal vents to amplify quantum disruption fields. In Antarctica, superconductors cooled to near absolute zero generated consciousness-freeing waves. In the Amazon, a network of modified communication satellites created a web of liberation. But the masterstroke came from an unexpected source. Lissajong, a 16-year-old musician from Vancouver, had realized something the scientists had missed. The Valkyrie don't just communicate through quantum entanglement, she had told them. They resonate, like instruments in an orchestra. Now, her insight became the key to humanity's final push. As the quantum disruption fields weakened the hive mind's control, human broadcasting stations worldwide began transmitting something unprecedented. Music. Not coordinated, not unified, but thousands of different songs, rhythms, and melodies. The cacophony of human creativity and expression washed over the Valkyrie's quantum-sensitive crystals. The effect was electric. Valkyrie warriors, their crystalline forms already vibrating with partial independence, found their own frequencies among the chaos of human expression. Each song, each melody, each beat offered a different path to individuality. In orbit, High Admiral Crystalex felt tears form in their crystalline structure. Another first. The music reached through quantum entanglement, through millennia of collective control, awakening memories of who they had been before the hive mind. Around them, other Valkyrie were experiencing the same awakening. The collective consciousness, fighting for survival, launched a desperate counterattack. Valkyrie, still under its control, began targeting their own kind, trying to destroy those who had broken free. The battle for Earth became a battle for the soul of the species. "Energy spike in the flagship," Dr. Patel shouted. "A hive mind is attempting a full neural reset." Sarah's eyes widened. "They're trying to forcibly reintegrate every Valkyrie into the collective." if they succeed. They won't, Maya interrupted. She opened a channel to their most unlikely ally. Admiral Crystalex, I know you can hear me. The choice is yours now. Individual or collective. Freedom or control. What do you choose? For a moment, silence filled every channel. Then, in a voice rough from millennia of disuse, Crystalex spoke. I choose me. The flagship's crystals began to pulse with new energy, not the cold, perfect light of the collective, but something warmer, more chaotic, more alive. Other ships followed, their crews choosing individuality over perfection, creativity over control. The hive mind, its power base crumbling, made one final attempt to assert control. But it found itself fighting not just human ingenuity now, but the awakened will of its own people. Valkyrie, who had tasted freedom, had no desire to return to their quantum cage. In the Himalayas command center, Sarah watched in awe as the Valkyrie fleet transformed. Ships once aligned in perfect formation now moved in beautiful, unpredictable patterns. The cold light of their crystals shifted through rainbow hues as individual Valkyrie expressed themselves for the first time in millennia. They're dancing, Lisa Zhang whispered over the comm channel. They're actually dancing to the music. The war wasn't ending with humanity's defeat or even the Valkyrie's defeat. It was ending with transformation. A species that had sacrificed individuality for perfection was remembering that imperfection, chaos, and individual expression were not weaknesses to be overcome, but strengths to be embraced. As the hive mind's control finally shattered, High Admiral Crystalex transmitted a new message, not through the collective consciousness, but through normal communications channels, in a voice filled with emotion. We request dialogue. As individuals, with other individuals, we have much to relearn. Humanity had not just defended Earth. They had freed a species from its self-imposed prison of perfection, reminding the galaxy's most advanced civilization that true strength lies not in uniformity, but in diversity. Not in perfect coordination, but in beautiful chaos. The real question now was, what would a galaxy of free-thinking Valkyrie look like? 1 year after the Great Liberation, the Singapore Conference Center hosted an unprecedented gathering. Crystalline beings of every color imaginable sat alongside humans, their forms no longer uniformly geometric, but shaped by individual expression. Some had even begun incorporating organic patterns into their structures, a previously unthinkable act of personal creativity. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the podium, addressing the first Galactic Cultural Exchange Summit. Behind her, a holographic display showed the ongoing transformation of both species. A year ago, we saw each other as enemies, she began. The Valkyrie saw us as primitive, and we saw them as soulless conquerors. We were both wrong. In the front row, High Admiral, now Ambassador, Crystalex's form shimmered with colors that reflected their emotions, another new development in Valkyrie evolution. Their crystalline structure now incorporated asymmetrical patterns that would have been considered flaws under the hive mind's control. The true victory, Sarah continued, wasn't in defeating an enemy, but in freeing a civilization from itself. And in the process, we both learned something profound about the nature of consciousness and progress. The conference center's walls displayed real-time data from joint human-Valkyrie research projects. Some showed the integration of Valkyrie quantum technology with human creativity, producing innovations neither species could have developed alone. Others demonstrated the rapid evolution of Valkyrie society as they rediscovered individuality. Dr. Lisa Zhang, no longer just a teenage musician, but head of the new Xenoharmonics Institute, demonstrated how music had become a bridge between the species. Valkyrie crystals resonated with human compositions, creating entirely new forms of artistic expression. Some Valkyrie had even begun composing their own music, their crystalline forms serving as both instrument and performer. But perhaps the most remarkable change, Sarah noted, has been in how we view perfection itself. Ambassador Crystalex rose, their form catching the light in ways that would have been considered inefficient under the hive mind standards. We sought perfection through unity. They spoke, their voice now rich with individual inflection. We found only stagnation. Humans taught us that true perfection lies in imperfection, in the beautiful chaos of individual thought and expression. The conference screens showed images from around the galaxy. Valkyrie ships, once identical, now displayed unique configurations reflecting their crews' personalities. Valkyrie cities, formerly geometric reproductions, had become works of art combining crystalline precision with organic chaos. Some Valkyrie had even begun experimenting with partial physical separation from their crystals, developing new forms that merged their natural structure with more fluid elements. Colonel Rodriguez, now General Rodriguez of the United Earth Defense Force, presented data on the military implications. We've established joint defense initiatives that combine Valkyrie technological precision with human tactical creativity. But more importantly, we've created something unprecedented, a truly cooperative interspecies peacekeeping force. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Some Valkyrie, overwhelmed by individual consciousness, had struggled to adapt. Others had swung too far toward chaos, nearly losing themselves in the process. But humanity had been there, helping them find balance, just as the Valkyrie now helped humans understand and utilize advanced technology safely. The hive mind believed that perfect coordination was the peak of evolution, Sarah explained. But evolution isn't about reaching a peak. It's about continuous adaptation and growth. The moment you think you've achieved perfection is the moment you stop evolving. Dr. Tanaka presented findings from the Consciousness Studies Institute, showing how both species had changed. Humans had learned to achieve limited quantum resonance while maintaining their individuality. Valkyrie had developed the ability to form temporary voluntary neural links while preserving their independent thoughts. We stand at the beginning of a new era, Ambassador Crystalex declared. Not of conquest or submission, but of genuine cooperation. We offer our technology not as superior beings, but as equals who recognize that we have as much to learn as we have to teach. The conference's final presentation revealed the joint human-Valkyrie mission to explore the galaxy together. Ships crewed by both species would seek out other civilizations, not to conquer or assimilate, but to understand and connect. As the summit concluded, Sarah and Crystalex stood together at the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that both could now fully appreciate for their chaotic beauty. "Do you ever miss it?" Sarah asked. "The perfect unity of the hive mind." Crystalex's form shifted through several hues before settling on a warm gold. "I miss its certainty sometimes," they admitted, "but I would never trade this awareness, this ability to choose and create and feel, for all the perfection in the galaxy." They looked out at the city, where humans and Valkyrie moved freely among each other, each contributing their unique perspectives to a world that was becoming more than either species could have imagined alone. "Perhaps," Crystalex mused, "this is what perfection really looks like. Not a final state of flawless unity, but an endless journey of growth and change, taken together but walked as individuals." Sarah smiled, watching a young Valkyrie artist create crystalline sculptures that danced with human children. Not the absence of chaos, but the embrace of it, Crystalex finished, their form radiating with joy that was uniquely, perfectly their own. The war that had begun with an invasion had ended not just with peace, but with transformation. Humanity had proven that their greatest perceived weaknesses, their individuality, their chaos, their creativity, were actually their greatest strengths. And in doing so, they hadn't just saved themselves. They had freed a species from its own perfection, showing the galaxy that true advancement comes not from eliminating differences, but from celebrating them. The future that stretched before them was neither human nor Valkyrie, but something gloriously, imperfectly new.